Welcome to Simply Sarah. I'm Sarah Stockham, your host, and I am delighted that you are here, carving out time out of your incredibly busy schedule to listen in, to allow your heart to be expanded, to be able to see the things around you through different eyes. The tools that we're going to be sharing today are going to be ones that you're going to be thinking about for a while and possibly even applying to your life in a different way so that you can be expanding all that you are doing as a leader, as an entrepreneur, as somebody who is impacting the world, who has something on their heart that they want to share. Today, I'm delighted to bring in Jan Barlow. And as Jan joins us, Jan, good morning and welcome, and thank you for being here.
Good morning, Sarah. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Absolutely. I am so pleased about this conversation because even as we were in the green room getting ready to come in and pre-record this, because this just works better in our schedules this week, this space of expansion, of force multipliers for good, were you raised with that idea, that concept, or was this something that you came to later in your life?
Well, it's interesting. I came from my mom and dad were big volunteers, although my dad worked a midnight shift, so he worked a lot. My mom was a true servant leader. So I was exposed to all the people that she knew. I had a brother who was and sister-in-law who were entrenched in the community. So I grew up around meeting people from all walks of life, and they would come over to our home for holidays and lunch. So I kind of witnessed all of it and saw how it worked, that you really become a center of influence when you bring people from the outside with diverse backgrounds, diverse industries, and you can really come together and start connecting to be that force multiplier for good. So that really, from a young age, influenced me. And that's one of the reasons why we started our social impact program.
Oh, that is so powerful. It just reminds me that when I was about 4 years old, we lived in a particular village in Congo, the Democratic Republic of Congo, then called Congo, and then it went to Zaire, and then came back to Congo. In that space, the table that we had, that our guests who were villagers, people who were living in the community, people who were coming in from the outside, from Europe, delegates who were coming in from America, they were coming in to sit around our table. And our table wasn't a table, it was literally a door that was taken off and put over sawhorses.
I
And we
love
put a
it.
tablecloth across that. And that is where we had some of the most influential people working on different kinds of projects in that part of the world. They would come and sit around the table with the tablecloth on it. I don't know that they knew that it was a door over sawhorses, with our mixed matched chairs that we had around the table. But that was my first introduction into bringing people around a table and saying, hey, what ideas do you have? How can we work on this together? How can we be force multipliers for good in the work that we are doing? And so finding like-minded people. How do you do that today? Because I know that you have your own company, Jobs That Fit Better. You'll say the name of it much better than I just did. But how did you come to that space, friend?
It really is about attracting people. Like, I don't, if I feel called to reach out to certain people, maybe on LinkedIn or whatever, but I get to, really, I'm so blessed because people are referred to me. So my core group of my center of influence, the people that I feel that we are force multipliers for good, we're in that core circle, they keep on referring people like you. And so to me, that's really how I like to do it. Now, I've been called sometimes to attend an event, and from one of my core, people, and I show up with an open heart and an open mind. And I got to be honest, I get real excited when I'm driving or getting ready to attend the event. I'm going, I can't wait to see who I'm going to be connected with and who I'm going to meet. I mean, it's like Christmas Eve and Christmas morning, because that's the way I look at it. I mean, I get so excited about like who God is going to put me with today. So that's kind of really the attitude and the heart that I take with it.
I love as a leader, Jan, that you start with an open heart. You start with this presupposition that the people who are going to be brought into your world are going to be people that are supposed to be there. And some of them are going to stay for a moment, some of them are going to stay for a long time, and some perhaps for the rest of the life, right?
Yes.
So coming into that space with that presupposition, that pre-framing that whoever is coming in is supposed to be there, and that if you can find ways to collaborate, ways to work together, that makes things even better and stronger, and then also strengthens that bond that is developing. So thank you for sharing that incredibly smart tool of starting off with an open heart and an open mind and just excited about what's going to be coming up in front of you. How did you build the business that you have now? What was your way of creating that?
So I used to work for a global pharmaceutical company. So I created my own job there. I was working in my strengths. I used to sell $1 million laser to eye doctors for the LASIK surgery. I train them on how to use it, them and their staff. And then I teach them really how to bring in patients, right? Because that's an elective surgery. So people were paying $4,000 to $5,000 out of pocket. That was before any patient financing. So I loved it because it was like starting new businesses. So a doctor would buy the laser. Well, he's starting his own LASIK practice. So it truly is a startup business. So I got to travel around the world to do that. And so I was hired by our biggest competitor and made sure that I was getting into, the same situation. This is what I do best. And so the manager, said yes. And so, but in the meantime, that company was merging or really acquiring two other companies at the same time.
Oh,
So that's, if anybody's experienced mergers and acquisitions, it is chaos.
it
And
is.
so 2 months later, my boss, ended up being transferred and I got another boss.
Mhm.
Well, she didn't like the fact that she didn't hire me and my colleague. So she changed our jobs,
Mm,
like everything. And so it was all the opposite of my strengths.
right.
So just thought I had to try harder. So after 6 months, my hair started to fall out, my palms started to peel, and I was sleeping for 12 hours. I could barely get up. And I tried to reach out to HR and said, look, this is a problem for me. But there was nobody available because, again, during merger and acquisition,
Yes.
everybody's in fear for their own job. So there's so much chaos going on. There's no support for employees then.
Mhm.
So I just had to stop. I had to get off this merry-go-round, and I had lost everything. My home, I got a divorce, my health was really bad. I went to a doctor and they said I was at risk for a heart attack and stroke. Um, it was it was like at the pit, right? And through it all though, I said, what when I think of how to bring myself up, it's always been I have to be put myself in a position of service. So I just automatically went into service mode, started a house cleaning business,
Mm,
selected some key friends who were judges, doctors,
mhm.
attorneys, and said, hey, I'm going to pick 5 clients. I'm available to clean house. And within a week, I had 5 clients, and it gave me joy to put order in other people's lives because mine did not have any. And
Yes.
so that was therapy for me.
Yeah.
So during that time is when I decided to start my nonprofit, Better Job Fit,
Mhm.
because I wanted to make sure that nobody is put in harm's way like I was. I want to make sure that people on the front end, you know what your strengths are, you know what circumstances or um, job positions are the best for you, what questions to ask during a discovery session, not an interview, but a discovery session to really ask questions how those people are going to work with you. So that's really how we started. We started
Mhm.
serving veterans and foster care alumni, and we were the job matching service between companies and the nonprofit organization, their stakeholders. So we were able to create custom job match patterns for each company for their position, and we were making sure that they matched the person that we were putting in that job. So some people say, well, that's pretty drastic. No, it's really important. It's very important because I'm an example of how you can be at the height of your game and your strengths in a company using and making a lot of money in your strengths. And then when you set somebody up for failure, it doesn't hurt anybody. Well, it hurt the company big time and it hurt me physically. So to me, that's criminal. I'm sorry. That's really, it's not a good thing.
It isn't. And in my own experience over the last, I became much more aware of it about 2007, 2008, and how companies were looking for the next best thing, looking for how they could increase their bottom line. And I have this philosophy, and it came from my husband when he got his MBA in organizational management. He learned and fully believed and believes now, and I think it's one of the reasons why people would come to work for him and then ask to never be transferred out of his department, was that business is actually created to make people's lives better. It's not created for the end game of everybody who is invested to make a lot of money. Now, you want that to be happening as well. You want that the people who are invested to be creating, you want the return on investment, absolutely, but not at the cost of people, and that people are more important than the paycheck. And so than that bonus at the end of the whatever. And so I really appreciate what you are sharing about this. And I think that so many people in that space of being churned and burned by companies have made the decision to become entrepreneurs or to open up a nonprofit or to do something on their own using their own skill set. And I support that. I applaud that. I celebrate that. And part of the reason why we have this show is to be helping people who are creating different things to be able to have the tools or to think about things a little bit differently as they are creating, as they're collaborating, as they are contributing in such powerful ways. So as you began the nonprofit, why did you choose to go the nonprofit route and not choose to go through a for-profit route? What was that decision like?
So what's interesting is I started out for profit. And for a few months, it goes back to the way I was raised. My mom volunteered for 25, 30 years, and she had her own business at the same time. So when I was looking at what actions, what services we were providing, in my heart, to really align with authenticity of service,
Yes.
it was just for me. It really is just a difference in how people perceive you.
Yes.
But it also is how I wanted it to align to my heart. That organization, right? That tax category, because that's really all it is. Is it a 501c3 or,
Right.
that's like being an employee, it's W-2 or 1099. I mean, that's just a tax designation. It's not a definition of who you are.
Right.
But what it did for me, it put my soul and my mind into service.
Yes.
It literally, I felt like it took a weight off of me.
Mm.
I run the business the same way, like it's a business. And what's interesting, there are a lot of nonprofits, whether it be, 501, anybody that's a 501c3, churches in particular, they don't run it as a business, meaning from the principal standpoint of you have customers, right? I mean, that's how a business is run. You have a customer.
Yes.
Traditional business, you have a customer that you serve, and then you have business practices, you have strategic planning. I mean, all those elements are still there or should be there, but sometimes we get hung up in this 501c3, or is it a for profit, and then that dictates
Yes.
the mental state and shareholders. And no, I mean, it's the same concept of serving others. It doesn't matter what your tax designation is, but you do have to align with what that mission, and sometimes in my case, that tax designation mattered to my heart. right? It literally
Yes.
affected my physical
Yes.
and mental, how I did
Yes.
business from my
Yes.
perspective.
Yes. Yes. I completely understand that space of alignment of what is in the heart and then having it come out. And there is, for so many people, a softer way of doing business if it is through a nonprofit. I remember that when we had our home open once a month for Reiki shares, and I had set up two different nonprofits, and one of them specifically was the one that people would donate to when they would come to that. And they just had this feel good about it that was different than if I said, everyone needs to pay X amount of money in order to be here as part of this. And as a result of that, I had somebody walk in who came and listened to a training that we had. It happened to be about the gene keys. And I had paid personally out of pocket for the person who was presenting. I wanted this to be completely a nonprofit moneymaker for those who wanted to donate. And somebody walked up to me and pulled money out of his pocket, $500, and said, I want this to go towards a nonprofit. Had it been a for-profit, I don't think he would have done that, right? So it opens up people's hearts in a different way as well. And opens up it can open up the conversation in a different way. We're going to take a quick break. We will be right back. I am so excited that I have to share that we just got another shipment from Hudson Naturals. We absolutely love them. This is the orange and lemongrass. It's moisturizing. It's shea butter. It's incredible. It's incredible. Just absolutely love it. And then I also want to share with you that we have another sponsor, another one who advertises with us, and that is the Glass Arts Collective. We are so grateful for their consistent support of what we are doing, the message that we are giving out in the world. The Glass Arts Collective is outside of Los Angeles. If you happen to be in that space, I encourage you to stop by, take a class, learn to break glass, learn to do things with it. The place that we have really come to appreciate them is also from ordering. When we need to have a gift for somebody, if we are looking for a signature piece in the house, we first go to Glass Arts Collective to see what they happen to have. Their inventory is changing all of the time. Absolutely love working with them. In this conversation with Jan, we are having an expansion of thought about how it looks to have a business and how it can be under an umbrella of a traditional business, a for-profit. That same business can also be under a nonprofit. And for some people, moving it into the nonprofit world, because it's still going to be a business, it's still going to be doing all the things for good. But for some people, being involved in a nonprofit helps to open up doors because it has aligned for them their heart, their gut, their thoughts. So it's their intuitive gut with their emotional heart and their thinking mind in that place of servanthood. And so as we bring Jan back into our conversation, Jan, I would love to hear from you this next part of after you choose to move it over from a for-profit into a nonprofit designation. How did that then change who your clients were, if it did? How did that then change your messaging, if it did?
Our messaging still stayed the same. What's interesting is because who we started serving in the beginning, and I think that had a lot to do with it as well. I started to reach out and work with the clients that I had in ophthalmology when it was for profit. So we were helping them when they went to hire people. We were able to use our job matching science, to help teams, etc. And then when I started to help my friends who were CEOs or founders of veteran organizations or foster care organizations, I think that's where I started to align with that servant of, nonprofit, because I was working with more nonprofits. But at the same time, I was matching those nonprofit stakeholders with companies. So, but the combination of became the champion for that nonprofit. So I really think that's what I started to take on, that championship, that gladiator in the suit for the nonprofit organization. And so it just really was natural for us to transition into a nonprofit.
What is your process of having someone who's like a teen, who possibly has been in foster care, or somebody who is a veteran and has been trained in certain skills, but those skill sets may not be ones that best align for them? What is the process that you take them through to help them discover who they are?
Thank you for asking that, Sarah. Those two populations specifically, I want to share, they are in environments that are controlled, highly controlled.
Right.
Okay, it's planned out. There's an internal structure or bubble that they stay in. Okay, and veterans and foster care alumni, when it comes time for employment and entering into the traditional job search process, they go into an area or an environment that has no rules, that has no guidelines, that has no structure to it. So their brain, our brain, when we think, right, we have, especially if we're in a groove or a pattern, your brain works linearly.
Yes.
Well, when you get out of that linear mindset or that structure, now your brain gets confused. And so you get into food, water, shelter mode. I mean, you could have again a roof over your head, but your brain gets into survival mode.
Yes.
So that really is a challenge for what we do, because again, they're reactionary. They just want to do something, right? So what I have to do and what we have to do is move them from the left brain of ego and survival to the right brain of free thinking and discovery. That's a process.
It is.
We use science, job matching science, objective science, that allows us to see job matches that no human being would ever be able to predict. So we take that linear or objective job matching science, we combine it with free thinking and that discovery mindset with what they've done before, to really start to access the internet and have the internet give us jobs and positions, or maybe articles that can lead to companies that are aligned with who we are and what we want to do. I got to be honest, that's really our biggest challenge with most people. If they're in that food, water, shelter mode, they got to get from left brain to right brain. But those two particular populations are really at risk, because veterans with high rate of suicide, they go from being successful in the military in that environment. When they go out to the free world, it's very different for them. And a lot of people don't understand that. And so companies don't really understand that. So they treat them just like they would treat anybody else. They just say, "Oh, well, you're a veteran." No, it's a totally different situation. That's really, it's getting them from that left brain to right brain. And it's interesting because, like, the veterans, their organization has with an MOS, so it's a acronym for a job matching process that they have. So they'll take the military job and compare it to a civilian job, right? Well, that's job description and job description. That's not job matching.
Right.
That's not matching the person to the job. So you see how that, like, people think, "Oh, no, they're matching the job, equating the job to the job." The person's not even involved in that process. So, like, excuse me, are you missing one element in that scenario? Isn't that crazy?
I understand how the military got to that, because they have trained people to be able to do X thing, right? And so if you can do X thing really well, whether or not you like it, whether or not it really is in your wheelhouse of love, that you should be able to then take that and transfer over to that same thing someplace else. And I understand how they got to that, but they did miss out, I think, on the human aspect of it, and that allowing the person to have time. For me, part of it is time. Um, when you were talking about living inside of a bubble, I really feel like that was part of my childhood. When we lived overseas, we were definitely in part of a bubble that it didn't matter what country you were from. If you were an expat and you were in Congo, you were there. We were there working together, whether or not our personalities matched or whatever. We were there for a common reason. And some people were there to help with agriculture. Some people were there to help with education. Some people were there to help with, living, raising the standard of living, teaching jobs, teaching how to garden. But everybody was there because they wanted to help the people who were there have a better life. So there was that commonality. Then coming to the States, when I came for college, I was a fish out of water, completely out of water. Because people would talk about watching a show called I Love Lucy. And my response to that was, who is Lucy and why should I love her, right? I had no context for that. We didn't have television overseas. The embassy would show a movie on Thursday evenings, sometimes Friday evenings. And, if it was the right whatever, then all the homework was done and all the chores were done, we could get to go. So there was some exposure to some of those kinds of things, but there wasn't. I mean, even the military kids who were there at 18, just out of military, as Marines at the embassy, all of us were there for a commonality, a common purpose. And so coming to the States there is such freedom. There's so many options. There's so many ways of doing whatever. And I think it can be a little bit overwhelming, even for somebody who's been raised here, who is a business person or who is beginning to step into new avenues of leadership, for them to see how broad the options are. And then to come into a place of saying, this is who I am, and this is how I best show up in the world, and to honor that. As painful as it can be, as difficult as it can be, the number of no's that you can get along the way, but to stay the course, because that is where you will find the greatest amount of opportunity to be able to connect in with other people at the deepest level, I believe.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. What's interesting, even, when you think of back to COVID, in 2020, 4.5 million people started their own business. In 2021, I think it was 5 million. 2022, 5.5 million. And I'm sorry, I don't have last year's numbers, but people are waking up and saying, you know what, I can't put all my eggs in one basket. So they're finding, out of survival and conscious survival, hey, I got to have options, and only I can create those options. So I think people are really want to hone in on, okay, let's identify what I love to do, what I can do, right? And that circumstance, to starting a business with nothing to, I got a couple of bucks that I can invest in me. There are I'm seeing way more people from an entrepreneurial standpoint who are employed. Some are looking for their next, right? Creating their next, but they also want to start a side gig and a side business. So, people are really waking up. And thanks to COVID, right? When you stick people on the couch for a year and a half, and they start to look within, right? Some change starts to happen.
I know for me, I already had a side gig, and that time, the downtime, gave me time to begin to work on my computer skills in a different way. I had some skills. I knew I needed to have more, and I knew I needed to have time to sit and play with things like Canva. Yeah. And now it's so intuitive, right? For me to sit and create there. At the time, it was, oh, you can change the fonts. Oh, you can change the colors. Oh, those fonts don't go together. Those kinds of pieces of, I needed to have the playtime. And it provided that for me, that allowed so many other things that once we started to come back, I felt like I had more wind underneath my wings, that I had a better understanding. And the one thing about investing in ourselves is that no one else can take it away from us. The other part about investing in ourselves is that we are the ones doing the work. And so if there are resistance to those kinds of things, I really encourage people to have some conversations with people who understand resistance and why those resistance patterns can be there, in order to be able to help you process that and move through it, because you can move through it. You can move past it. But those pieces are there oftentimes holding people back, and they don't need to. They can, but they don't need to.
Well, it's interesting, when people say, "Oh, well, I don't know if I can invest the money right now into, working with you." And it's funny. I was thinking today, I said, we deal with technology. That's our business. It's job matching technology. So I always ask people, do you have an iPhone? Well, yeah. How much did you invest in that?
Yeah.
And what do you use it for? Email, texting.
Right.
Well, I got this that does the same thing, and it only costs $54 a month. Right? So when you put it in that perspective, the whole question is to really get people to think.
Yes.
Right? That's really what it is.
Yes. As you work with the technology, are you working specifically in one geographical region, or are you able to help match people across the country?
Across the country. We are working with companies, and I don't know if you've read, the last couple of years, Deloitte has put out a global report. And my friend, it's all about human sustainability. And human sustainability is about, you have to learn what your skill sets are and how to maximize that, and how many different ways you can use those skills, right? And companies need to be doing that too. It's like having a screwdriver. How many different ways can you use a screwdriver? I know I've used it like 4 or 5 different ways, but the instructions say you use it for screws.
Right.
Well, we're just a tool. So thinking it, whether we're using ourselves or somebody else is going to, we're bringing value to another organization, how can they help use us?
Yes.
It's really about fulfilling yourself, your potential.
Yes.
Right? So we'll have a job hiring, working with a company that says, hey, I want you to assess our current staff. And then we create a custom job match pattern, and that person may be, according to that job description, may only be a 79% match to their job. And the person's like, oh my gosh, if they find out that I'm only a 79% match, they might want to, fire me. I'm like, no, what that means is they're only using 79% of your gifts.
Yes.
They've left all this out because they're not tapping into it. So it's just like a screwdriver. If you're only using it to screw in screws, guess what? I know I've used it to open up paint cans, to put the paint can lid back on. I mean, it's that simple.
It is. It is. Yes. In the process of advice, what advice would you give to somebody who is in that space, Jan, where they have been working for a company, they feel like it's just unsustainable. It's changed how much they weigh, whether they have gained or they have lost. It's changed their sleep patterns. It's changed their hair falling out. It's changed their thyroid patterns, right? And all of these things we know to be the outcome of long-term stress. All of these things are things that if we learn to prevent the stress, if we learn to, in the 10-second solution, if we're able to use tools during that time, that we can see what's happening around us and still be able to show up, but not have it do that devastation on our bodies. But until I learned about the 10-second solution, I went through a very similar thing. I got a call from the doctor's office one day saying, I have half a thyroid that was supposed to wake up. It never did right after surgery. And so I take Synthroid, or a synthetic thyroid medication. And I feel great when I take a little bit more. And they had me on a little bit more, and they had done my blood work, and they called me and said, you stop immediately, because you are the same call that you got. you are in that heart attack or stroke
Wow.
zone. I was in my 40s, right? I had
Yes,
never ever
yes.
considered, right? Never considered that to be an option. And so, we backed it down and we're in a good place. But having had that phone call, I felt great. It was the best I'd felt after having half of my thyroid taken out.
Yes.
To go, wait a minute, that's where I feel really good, but that is detrimental to my full being. And so, if you find somebody who is in that place, what advice would you give them about how to best discover who they really are, what their vibration is about, what they bring to the table, what fulfills them? How would you encourage them to move forward?
The what's interesting is before, when you start to feel the physical effects
Mhm.
of that stress, it's first of all being in tune with, okay, if you start to feel the warning sign of negative feeling, that's your first warning sign. Like,
It's a
so going
signal.
for it, right? Exactly. After going down that road, if I experience and when I experience it to that level of anxiety or whatever, I'm like, whoa, let's not go down that road before because we know how that turns out. So, for me, I have to go from my left brain to my right brain. And
Mhm.
so I automatically, go for a walk. Um, People, we get messages, we get led, we're guided by that higher self, right? But we have to put ourselves in that position mentally, emotionally, and physically to connect with that higher vibration and higher self. So for me, when you're feeling like that, feeling out of sorts, don't know what to do, you've reached your limit, um, that's the first sign to go from left brain to right brain. Get out, walk, exercise, go for a drive so you can open up the right side of your brain and receive the messaging and guidance from that higher self. I mean, to me, that's like, that goes back to foundation because we're given direction. We have the answers, but you have to tap into that higher, that
Yeah.
other side of your God brain, right?
You have to tap into the library because all the information is there, right?
So
But,
true.
but some of us really struggle to get to the library. We're not sure we have a library card, and we're trying to figure out. And the last time we were in a library, maybe our experience wasn't so good taking it from the real library, right? And so
Yeah.
coming into that space of saying, this may be something that's new and different, but I am going to find out ways to do that. And you're absolutely right. Taking a walk causes, we use the gross motor skills, right?
Yes.
And when you use the gross motor skills, it stops the brain from whatever it's perseverating on, whatever it's thinking about constantly. And
Yes.
so, and also then causes us, because we're moving more, we need more oxygen. So now we're beginning to breathe deeper. And if we can move away from thoracic breathing up here by our chest and start moving down to the lower abdominals,
Yes.
actually releasing the stress in the lower abdominals rather than clenching them up, just for allowing them to relax. In fact, I will often, when I'm teaching my course from stressed to best, I will often start with clench it up, taking the
Yes.
belly button to the spine and tightening all of that up before relaxing that. And that was something I learned from Brian Tracy in his book, Maximum Achievement, years ago. That if you have an area that you're trying to relax, don't move towards relaxation first, move towards making it more intensely constricted, because from there, then you can actually cause the relaxation to happen differently. And what a
You
difference
know,
it makes.
what's interesting, Sarah, I go to a chiropractor that also does stretching, muscle stretching and everything, and it's the same thing. So you press, so he'll say, press against my hand or my arm or my leg, and then as much as you can for 5 seconds. And then when you release, then you're able to stretch even more. So exactly to your point.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful. What is one of those stories that you are willing to share? I know that you have many of them, but a success story about somebody that you were working with and perhaps had been struggling to find a placement or was concerned that they would be able to move out of the world of highly structured into a space of being able to easily allow their gifts to unfold.
My favorite story is about a woman that she was 10 months out of a job. So her job had been absorbed within the organization. She was an HR compensation and benefits representative. And she was not in a good mental space. So we did the job matching process, and she was an 87% match to sales and technology.
Oh,
She automatically said, "Oh, no, I can't do that. Salespeople are pushy." Okay, so let's unpack that. What bad experience have you had with salespeople? Well, I haven't. Okay, so what leads you to perceive that? Well, because say everybody knows salespeople are pushy. Okay, again, limited beliefs that aren't even in that person's realm, right? I said, okay, so let's talk about how we're going to use this, information. But first, we have scales of behavior from 1 to 10. I said, so what's your scale on assertiveness? And she said, 8 out of 10. I said, okay, so let me just share with you the numbers. Okay, out of 140,000 people that were used in the validation of this assessment tool, if you score a 1 or a 10, you represent 2.5% of 140,000 people.
wow.
Then it goes 9 is 4.5, and then 8, where she was,
Yes.
7.5. And I said, so that means 92.5% of 140,000 people think you're pushy. That was the aha moment. So you have to create a psychological disruptor
Yes.
of perception, right? That plays this
Mhm.
loop and keeps us from thinking outside or thinking differently, right?
Mhm.
We just keep on playing that pattern all over again.
Right.
Once I created that psychological disruptor for her, and then I shared with her how we're going to use sales and technology. We combined it with her experience with compensation benefits. She was doing working for Aetna. She got a nutritional certification that she was doing on the side,
Yes.
counseling patients like diabetics and people with heart issues. So it matched her training, educator, right? Everything that's on her job match
Yes.
report. Then we went to Google, and we teach a very unique way of how to conduct a Boolean search with very unique search strings that are customized to the person.
Perfect.
We were able to find her a position, identify a position with a startup company that they had software. They sold software that helps companies decide what health insurance plan is best for them. So she was working in the back end of sales for user experience, training the clients after the sale. So unless we would have, two things, unless I was able to get her out of that loop of thinking that she couldn't even possibly entertain
Right.
those two words,
Yes.
and
Yes.
then getting her being able to be open to see how we were connecting the dots to match her. You have to get them in that right side of the brain. So that's always my main story, because again, it addresses our belief systems that we don't even have to have personal
Right.
experience with, that we
So true.
believe are
Yes.
that we cannot be objective about ourself.
Mhm.
So her being an 8 out of 10, and
Right.
she says other people are pushy. Well, guess what? You are. People will
Yes.
perceive you. So that has really the all-encompassing
Mm.
success story of Better Job Fit and what we stand for, because it's about thinking differently to
Yeah.
open up new opportunities.
Yes. Do you find the majority of people that you help place are choosing to work online, or are the majority of people wanting or choosing the in-person?
It's customized. That's why Better Job Fit is customizable. We look at that person, like we have some people that are an 8 on sociability.
Mhm.
We create a circumstance. If there's a job that says it's remote and they love it, we then are going to say, okay, let's see what else you can do in person to help feed that sociability scale. Or is there, I mean, that's what we're looking at, the person, in the full person. It's not just about the job. It's like, okay, if this is a job, a position that you really love, you still need to be fed with that 8 on sociability. So let's talk about that. So that means we want to make sure that you volunteer maybe to lead a group,
Mhm.
within your company. I mean, it's literally about customizing what that looks like for them.
Yeah. I'm thinking of somebody right now who is a director of econometrics for a company. And in her experience, has her own team, runs the own team, but it's another team that they do some kind of a word search or something, a game that comes out. I want to say it's like New York Times or Los Angeles or whatever, right? One of those, and they have this agreement. They have found each other inside the company. I guess that's what I'm saying. So it's not that she is necessarily spending lots of time with um, playing, because playing is so important for us to do, being able to problem solve, being able to have conversations, that interaction, that
Yes.
playfulness, right? That she's found a different group that was already doing it, and they invited her in to come join that. So you're right about the sociability part. Maybe it is right with your own team, but sometimes it's really, really good to look in the company across the board to see if there's another place, another team that you would prefer to have that outlet with. I know that when I was teaching, that there was a specific group that I really enjoyed spending time with, investing time with, enjoying doing lunch. And I made sure that it was on my calendar when we were all going to go to lunch together. I was going to be there with them, just because the interaction, the heart-to-heart conversations were just so good. And it was non-judgmental. It was non-competitive. It was just about being together. And I so appreciated that. In the jobs that you are helping people, or the people who are coming to you who are looking for better fit jobs, are they service oriented? Are they people who are more, I'm looking for the word that I want to use here. I guess, and you're going to go through cycles of different groups of people who are going to come through, right? But are you finding that there is one particular uh, world way of seeing the world that most people come with who come to work with you?
It's interesting. The commonality is in the people, that they're in a space and place in their own level of awareness and consciousness, that their higher self is pulling them up, right? So they're experiencing a level of, hey, I'm settled. Like, why do I keep on being, something's not right? Like, why can't I just be happy? I make good money. I have a great family. I've been in this job for 10 years. Like why can't I just settle? Right? Because that's what the world says. Why can't you just be happy with that? Right?
Yes.
But we're designed as human beings to expand and grow like all living things. So you have to keep up with that expansion. And
Yeah.
so with me, right, and with anybody else, when you try to squash, or when you don't live up to that potential and that expansion, because we're going to expand no matter what, whether you choose to come or not. When you fight that
Mhm.
expansion, that's when dis-ease happens,
Mhm.
and disease, the physical manifestation of disease, happens. So I was trying to stick it out
Mhm.
with that old boss, right? I just said, well, my father was a Marine, so like I just need to suck it up.
Right.
uh
Yeah.
no, that higher self was, you are not where you're supposed to be. This does
Mhm.
not live to, you're not living in your potential. And so when that happens, it just physically manifests itself. So the commonality is people are feeling that resistance gap of
Mhm.
who their higher self is pulling them up,
Mhm.
right? And so that's what I love about mixing the job matching technology with the right side of the brain and the free thinking and the
Yeah.
person's discovery and imagination of what's possible, is because those two combined opens up a whole new, right, whole new person. So but the
Yes.
commonality is that those people are hearing that knock at the door and that pull of the higher self saying, you need to grow and expand more.
Jan, what I love is I'm not hearing you talk about regret at all. I'm
Mm.
hearing you talk about possibility and openness and what's available right now and what could be in the future, and having real tracks to be able to get there, not just there's a cloud over there and I'm not really sure how to get there kind of a thing. But what you are providing is the absolute way of, if you are willing to do the work, if you're willing to do the self-discovery, and you can do it the easy way and work with Jan, or you can do it the hard way and keep trying to figure it out on your
Yeah.
own. Both ways you're going to figure it out. I am a firm believer of that. But I just think that sometimes the shortcut is the faster way can be so much more powerful, because you have more life then to be in lots of different ways in terms of time as well, but more life to be able to dedicate to this calling of who you are. Not everybody is born inside of a family that sees those gifts and encourages them. And so it becomes on our shoulders, it becomes our mature responsibility to find out, to seek it out, and then to develop that, to invest in ourselves. I remember listening to somebody speaking at a success conference that Darren Hardy had put together. And, John C. Maxwell was there, and I cannot remember this speaker's name. She spoke very, very short, but it was just so to the point. She says that it was more her dedication to herself was that she would spend more on self-improvement than on her car payment every single month.
Wow.
And I thought, that's a great line to draw in the sand, right?
Yeah.
That's a great place to say, this is what's more important to me, is the developing who I am and finding the right places to be able to do that, not just throwing money to the wind saying, I hope this person's going to be good. Do your due diligence and figure it out.
And that what's interesting is, this shift of change that happens all day, every day is so, it can be overwhelming, right? Because our brain is wired to resist change. For me, that experience of why was it that I created my own job in a global pharmaceutical company, exceeded any goals that our department had when it came to getting doctors up and running, and how is it that I can be hired for the same job and it go to heck in the handbasket, right? And the employee most of the time is blamed. Well,
So true.
and I'm like, okay, that really upsets me because it's not
Yes.
it's not the case. It shouldn't be the case because it's the employer that is the one
Yes.
that knows what is necessary to be successful in the job. And
Yes.
if all the other person wants is that they're applying for a job, right? And so, and for during a merger and acquisition to not be there for your people, there was nobody.
Right.
We have got to put back the value in human life, and that comes to with work. Sorry, but that's where
Yes.
we need to be right now.
Yes.
But individuals have to start taking control, or over their destiny, meaning go beyond the limited belief of yourself and what you think it's possible. Like
Right.
our parents, my mom, I know she loved me, right, Sarah? But
Yes.
in her eyes, just get married and you could get a secretarial position.
Mhm.
Well, I moved because I had a dean. I worked 3 jobs going to college. I
Mhm.
worked one of the jobs at a law school, and the dean of that law school was a general. And he saw where I excelled, and he said, Miss Jan, you need to get out of Ohio. And I know people in DC, and I want you to take your week off from spring break, and I don't want you to work. I want you to go for interviews.
Mhm.
Well, my parents were like, what?
Right.
Because somebody saw my potential.
Yes.
And so I went and I got 3 job offers. And I moved, I picked one and moved to DC, and and I went to law school. And, and my parents were like, well, they just didn't believe I could do it
Right.
because it wasn't that they didn't love me. It's just human beings have a limited belief their
Yes.
own limited beliefs that are
Yes.
projected on others.
Yes.
It's just is what it is. So why would you keep on betting the farm on what you think might, the 5% of what you think is possible? That's why we use job matching technology. Why? It's like, why do you use a GPS? It's
Right.
different.
It will get you where you need to be.
You don't have to memorize it. Like, you don't.
Right.
So you use a GPS to get
Mhm.
from point A to point B. Why
Yes.
wouldn't you use job matching technology to open up doors that you never knew existed, right?
Yes. Yes. Oh, Jan, this is so good. Is there anything that you want to reiterate, my friend?
You know, Sarah, it just really is about, like you said, investing in yourself,
Mhm.
because nobody else will. It's up to you, you know.
Yeah.
And when it comes to, you know, creating your next, it's not about finding a job. The word find has to do with the definition of the word find is to happen upon by chance. The
Mm.
word create is to bring something about into existence.
So good.
That's why we call it creating your next.
Yes. Yes. Creating your next. It's so good. Jan, I look forward to future conversations with you. Thank you so much for
Oh,
taking
my
time out of
friend.
your incredibly busy schedule. And I'm so grateful for this conversation. It's been very enlightening for me, friend.
Thank you so much, Sarah. And I look forward to the next time. You're just so precious. Thank you.
Thank you. And to our audience, we find you to be the reason that we do this show. We are so pleased that we are sharing with a global audience, that is a growing audience. We are so excited about that. Thank you for being here, for listening in, for allowing this show, Simply Sarah, to be touching your life. And I just want to give a shout out to the artist who did the artwork behind. This is her.
Hi, I'm Michelle. I am the founder and owner of Lamano Art. I began this business over 20 years ago. I specialize in paintings of all kinds. I make murals, portraits, and live paintings. My specialty is color and also telling a story. Some of the work that Lamano Art does are calligraphy pieces, wedding invitations, sign work, and sculptures like fairy doors. I'm open to working with anyone on any idea. Please feel free to contact me at your